everybody. This is Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome. Welcome back to another video over here on That's Comical. And if you're watching and it happens to be a Wednesday, happy new comic book day. This is going to be the last time that I date stamp over the next couple of videos. It is now officially Wednesday, May the 6th, 2026. So it is new comic book day. But this is actually past free comic book day, which was Saturday, May 2nd, 2026. So I'm hoping that you all had a good time. I'm hoping that you got your free books. I'm also hoping that you did at least give your local comic book shop a little bit of purchasing to show them some love and how much you care. The free comic book day at our local comic book shop was bonkers. It was fantastic. They had a whole bunch of artists from Archie actually signing books, which was pretty cool. But I actually did manage to pick up a book that I did want, and I'm hoping to talk about it on the channel at some point in time. But I am with Andy tonight for another episode of Ultimate Journey. Andy, I hope that you are doing well and that your free comic book day was good.
Doing well, and yeah, we had a little bit of a different free comic book day. It's past couple of years, it's been a celebration between me and Steve. We did it solo, but you know what? We picked up good stuff, and I hope everybody else did too.
Yeah. So today we're going to be back on the road to the 2015 Secret Wars, and we are actually at a very interesting juncture here. We are actually concluding the second story arc, which is actually a themed part of our journey, which was a journey into the first installment of the Marvel Ultimate Universe. That, of course, was the brainchild of greats like Brian Michael Bendis and Warren Ellis and Mark Miller, just to name a few. And we're going to be talking about the first story arc of Ultimate Comics, The Ultimates, just the first 6 issues. Now, did we need to really go into this story? Truthfully, I would say, guys, that if you're going to do the core reading that leads you to 2015 Secret Wars, this is not necessarily a book you really have to read. But for the purposes of our personal journeys, mine and Andy's, I can tell you 2 reasons why this specific book is important. And it's funny because those 2 reasons are intertwined. Why? Because they are an integral part of the 2015 Secret Wars. We are introduced to a very important character that plays a very important role, not just in the actual core story of Secret Wars itself, but a couple of stories that lead up to Secret Wars. And more importantly, this is actually the first documented time in this ultimate journey that the 2 creators of 2015 Secret Wars combined to make a comic book. And that, of course, is Jonathan Hickman and Assad Ribic. This is actually our first moment in our Marvel Ultimate journey where we actually mention Jonathan Hickman, because Jonathan Hickman is the one that gives us the brilliant climax that is 2015 Secret Wars.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good one to read because you're right. Is it essential on the journey to someone trying to go completely bare bones? I don't know, but I would say it feels rewarding to do it
Yes.
because unlike, for anyone who is or isn't following what we've been reading for Blackest Night on the DC journey, you know, the way we choose a lot of our stories is really based on, since Geoff Johns is such an encyclopedia of Green Lantern, it's about the history and key moments and knowing that he's going to pick on them. Let's read those moments. And with Secret Wars, there's something a little bit more nebulous going on because what's great about Secret Wars isn't just the reference and the joy from having been along for the ride and letting this be a culmination, but a big part of it is just the vibe of what it means for these 2 universes that people had grown to love. And in order to really enjoy Secret Wars, I think you need to spend enough time living in the Ultimate Universe so that it doesn't feel like the A team and the B team, right? You need to have a little bit more skin in the game, having grown to love this version of these characters. And so, broadly speaking, I'm glad we read this one because I think that this does a particularly good job of A, giving us more time with a key character in Secret Wars for sure, but B, letting us really see some of what makes them tick with some key members of the Avengers, or in this case, the Ultimates, to really appreciate what's at stake in their existence or non-existence when we get to Secret Wars. So I would say don't skip this one, even though I could understand a real purist just going for moment, would choose this isn't one of the ones they're going to read.
Yeah, and another thing that makes this specific journey very different from the DC Ultimate Journey is the fact that we're actually not reading this in chronological order, because some of the stuff that we have actually already read, I mean, we started with The House of M,
That's
which
them, yeah.
was created in 2008. Some of these specific books that we have been reading in the Ultimate Universe were created just about half a decade prior.
Hmm.
So again, I think that also really does fit into the theme that is Secret Wars, and that's the fact that, we're talking about two different timelines, two different worlds that are eventually going to collide. So the fact that we went and took a little bit of a step to the side, as I believe I said when we started going into this second arc, was
Hmm.
to be able to get an understanding of what is Earth 1610, who are the characters that are in Earth 1610, Universe 1610. But also, more importantly, and that again is why we're reading this specific story today, is because there were two very important characters that spawn out of the Ultimate Universe, and they play major roles. One of them, of course, we've talked about, which was Miles Morales. Again, we talked about the death of Spider-Man, another story that is fantastic to read, but isn't a seriously core story that plays into Secret Wars. Not necessarily,
Hmm.
but if you want to get a feel for what is the beginnings of Miles Morales, that's why you read The Death of Spider-Man in the Ultimate Universe. And the same can be said about the specific character that we're talking about today, and that is the guy that goes by the name of the Maker, because the Maker is the reason why, along with Miles Morales, why the Ultimate Universe is so important to the Secret Wars Ultimate Journey.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So I mean, look, we can dive into it however you would like. I think you hit the nail on the head with that. I danced around the Maker a little bit, but here we are. I mean, we've encountered the Maker before. But this is kind of that crowning moment, that reveal for the Ultimates, that this is who we're dealing with. And it helps that we have read some Ultimate Fantastic Four, right? That lets us really
Exactly.
get to
Well,
feel the
I
impact of
I
this.
just want to get your overall feelings about this specific story, and then I'll give you mine, because this was the first time that this is the second time actually that I'm reading it. So it's been a while. And I gotta say that my thoughts about reading this story are definitely not the same thoughts that I had when I first read it. And
Interesting.
it's not that I'm saying that the story is bad. I want to make that clear, but it's my feelings about the atmosphere that
Hmm.
changed.
Hmm. Interesting. So, I mean, I'll tell you, I like this. It's not an all-time favorite, but I do think it's good. This was also my second time reading it. It's been a while since I had read it the first time. I have a feeling my opinions have stayed largely the same. I went into it thinking like this is going to be fun, but not one of my favorite comics ever, and I completed and I thought, yep, it was fun, but not one of my favorite comics ever. Um, I was unprepared for how much I would like a couple emotional beats in it that I did not remember being there, that were meaningful and cool, and I like to get to see the characters. Um, but if I were to play like devil's advocate and like try to like talk down on this book, what I would probably say is an opinion that I don't hold, but to steelman the opposition here, I would say not too much happens in this book.
That
Um,
is very true.
we kind of we have the reveal of the Maker, we have the reveal of the city. We understand how like the relationship is between Reed, the city, and the children, right, who reside there. Um, But at the end of the day, we have no resolution of anything by the end of it. Now, that's the best I can do at denigrating it. I can understand why someone would say that, but for me, I feel like there's enough action, emotion, and high stakes throughout the whole thing that makes it feel like I did just engage with a story that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, even if it is not fully resolved and now there's no more problem at the end. I do feel like we get that aha moment, that reveal moment, and you get some really cool fights in there. And some really bad shit happens to a lot of the
Yeah,
world. So things happen, but narratively speaking, I could understand if someone came away from it and went, "Well, nothing happened." It's not me, but like I kind of get that takeaway. If
yeah,
that's
and I always like say this when I actually have a lot of sit downs with Cammy and we talk about things. Like I always say, I'd love to get an opportunity and sit down with the creator just to get in their head and see if the intentions that I thought that they had with these specific stories were there when they were originally doing
hmm
it, or was it just something that would come to pass at a later point in time.
hmm
The thing that changed for me was the fact that this 6 issue story arc is extremely bleak. Like
yes,
you feel like you are
yes,
in a very dark place when it
yes.
comes to reading this book. Like when you first see the maker gather his children towards this big building that looks like the explosion of an atomic bomb,
hmm
basically saying, "My children, we will live here and we will grow and we will conquer." It's like, it's crazy to believe. And when you get an understanding of what the city is like, I don't know about you, but I get major vibes of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And that's a
hmm
book that I do not like. I want to make
hmm
that, not because of the fact that it's a bad book, it makes me very uncomfortable, that book.
Sure.
It
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
And learning about how the people there, like they talked about how thousands of years will pass in a matter of days and weeks and months. The fact that there was a child born in the city, and then after that, the children of those children, and so on and so forth, were artificially grown. And the fact that they are just in this city, never going into the outside world and studying and tinkering and training for a major thing that is to come, and you feel that. And what I'm trying
Yeah.
to get at is this a foreshadowing that Hickman is officially, now that he's a part of this universe, is he officially saying or foreshadowing what is to come of the 1610 universe?
So I think so. And I know this is why you say you'd really love to sit down with a creator and like clarify some of that about where they were at while writing it. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in hindsight, there's no other way to read it. I mean, of course there's other ways to read it, but it's impossible to ignore in hindsight. But it seems to me, I don't want to say on the nose, but it seems so thematically linked to a preparation for an end times, a Ragnarok, if you will, of Thor goes through his own version of it in this book. But it seems to me like the seeds must have been planted at this point for what we were going to do with Secret Wars. There's no way in my mind that it wasn't.
Yeah, because the truth of the matter is, if you really think about it, Jonathan Hickman gets his claws into a lot of the other stories that we're going to be reading moving forward until it literally is. You see, that's the interesting thing that the DC and the Marvel Ultimate Journeys will have in common. Eventually, it's all going to come down to one singular creative team that
hmm
is going to be telling us the story that's going to lead to the climax. And Jonathan Hickman is going to be the leader of the said Marvel creative team that's going to get us to Secret Wars. And
Yeah.
so I think the other interesting thing in this whole story is, you mentioned this is sort of Thor's version of Ragnarok. And this
hmm
is definitely not the same Thor from the Ultimates that
No.
Mark Miller made. This is
No.
not a peace seeking guy. This is a guy who likes to drink, who likes to rumble. And I love the fact that the only reason why the city is discovered is because of a bar fight between Thor and Captain Britain. Let's just put it this way: there's no Freddie Prinze Jr. in this story. That's how atmospheric this chapter is.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, you're right about that. And also when I talk about the emotional beats here and the character depth, I do think that it's important to point out that like we're setting the ground that this is the take on the character that we're going to be using for Secret Wars. Because I mean, different creators bring their own spin to every character, and there's kind of like that core to certain characters that we talk about it on this show, whether we're doing a creator's notes and how they approach things broadly, or a deep dive into a character profile, and we talk about how different creators have come to the same character and like explored their ethos in different ways. Like, so I think it's good that we read this for this one as well, just to get a level set understanding of like, all right, we know Thor, we even know Ultimate Thor, but who's Hickman's Ultimate Thor, right? And you can say that for every character, even if you think that they're a little bit more, you know, stable throughout, from what we've past read. Tony's very similar,
Yeah,
in
well, I definitely
comparison.
want to go into Tony a little bit too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But in comparison, he's much more similar. And I think most of them are. Thor's the one where you really see kind of that difference start to come in. But recognizably Thor, and recognizably, all right, this is who we're dealing with for the remainder of this journey.
Yeah, and the whole thing with Tony is like you're right. His mannerisms are very similar to when we were first introduced to him in the Ultimates. Like he's very carefree, but the only thing that I think is a little bit different here is that he kind of feels like he is the leader of a team,
Yeah.
and yet nobody seems to appreciate or agree with him in anything that he does because they all think that he is just careless and recluse. And we see that happen when he actually does get into the conundrums that he gets into in these couple of issues.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I'm sure we talked about it when we spoke about the Ultimates before in the Ultimate Universe, but like it bears mentioning that like this is Robert Downey Jr. Like, right? Like this is the inspiration. Like this
Yeah.
this take on the character. This is Robert Downey Jr. Not that he is not recognizably Iron Man in the 616 sense. But nevertheless, like it's kind of funny when you read it how much of it is what you see on screen. And honestly, the main reason I mentioned that is because I think it ties into, and the MCU drew upon the Ultimate
Oh,
Universe so
absolutely.
heavily, so heavily. I think the trajectory of Tony's character, you can see the seeds of here, what happened in the MCU of that finding that heart, being a little bit less of a playboy over time, becoming more and more selfless. And you see the seeds of that here because you're right. He's behaving as a leader at this point, even if he's not really leading anybody. And it's an interesting like interim step. And we'll see. There's some things in Secret Wars we'll get to that we're still a ways away from. But I think you're right to pick up on that. That is a difference, but that's something that's highly intentional.
Yeah, and it's simply because of the fact that this group is kind of leaderless at this moment because of the fact that a certain leader is no longer working with them anymore. Captain America is
Hmm.
doing his own thing, and again, I personally have not read enough of the Ultimate Universe to see the reasoning as to why Captain America ventured out on his own. But it is kind of sad when I believe it's Nick Fury that comes to him and asks him, will he come back because we kind of need you, especially with what we recently discovered? And he literally stands firm and says absolutely not. And you see, that's another reason why the Ultimate Universe is the the universe and the popular universe that it is. It's because of the fact that all of the characters that we know and love were just written in such different ways. I mean, Steve Rogers, even in this universe, was still, the all American patriot, but he had a little bit more of an edge to him. He had a little bit more of a bite. He wasn't this Boy Scout. He had an edge to him, and there were points in time. I still remember the whole situation in the Ultimates when they unfortunately discover what happened between Ant-Man and the Wasp, and he
Mhm.
literally hunts Hank Pym down, and there's a point in time where he's literally beating him up in an alley. Steve Rogers in the 616 does not do that.
And yeah, now I should have looked it up ahead of time because it crossed my mind while I was reading it. I know I read whatever led to his defection from helping everyone out at some point in the past. I'm blanking on it right now. Spoiler alert, not relevant to the journey. But like, but regardless, yeah, it's take it more as we're not going to read every single story. Of course, we're already reading more than the average reader does, but take that one in stride. There's some distance between Steve and the rest of them at this point in time. At the end, he seems very set on that. Let's see how that progresses as we move forward.
Yeah. And we also do see the power of the Maker when Thor and Captain Britain are there. And once again, it gets very uncomforting because when these guys are captured, the children are meant to put them on lab tables and dissect them for science. Like, it's absolutely gruesome at times when you hear about some of the things that they're trying to do. But the craziest thing is when they officially get to Thor, they're like, there's something wrong with him. There's something different. And then, of course, the Maker is the one that steps in and says, that's because he's not human. He is a god. And, we have a couple of additional moments here, but Thor basically does everything he can to defeat and try to escape the city, and he just cannot do it. The Maker is just too powerful. And then,
Mhm.
of course, we said it earlier, but let's address the elephant in the room. The Maker is revealed to be none other than Reed Richards of the formerly of the Fantastic Four. And we all remember when we read Ultimate Doomsday in our Ultimate Journey, the fact that he went in a completely different direction. Another thing that I think makes the Ultimate Universe so memorable, the fact that we had one of the most honorable heroes in Marvel lore become the villain. And let me just say, as a person who just recently read a large chunk of the comics, including the comics that led up to the coming of Galactus, the great Stan Lee and Jack Kirby Fantastic Four, you read what Reed is like in these books, and it's like you couldn't even fathom at that time. I would wonder that you could ever write Reed Richards as a villain. But more
Mhm.
importantly, it's one of the scariest concepts to
Mhm.
think of Reed Richards as a supervillain. But
Yeah.
now we see it, and it's not just a brilliant mind. This is a monster,
Yeah.
especially when we see what he looks like under the helmet.
Yeah, it's very disturbing. Everything there's so much like body horror going on in the city between he himself and the quote unquote children. Like it's very I totally understand what you're saying about the tone of this book. It's very bleak and then it's very unsettling.
Yeah,
And so you're right, seeing Reed in this light is oi. This
yeah,
this
because
this can be
the
a rough
whole
one.
the whole concept of his helmet is just one of the most unsettling things. He basically is he looks like a xenomorph,
Hmm.
pretty much. Like he's lost all of his hair. He's got an extremely long oblongish like head because he's basically trying to extend his skull to make his brain work faster, harder, better. It is the most unusual way to go about it, but look, it's clearly working here.
Hmm.
Considering the fact that he created a city like this, and considering the fact that these people that have been living in there have been living for thousands and thousands of years and are way advanced. And like I said, it's bleak. The heroes don't even know if this is a battle that they can even win.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's certainly not presented as a winnable battle. There is no step along the way where it feels like they hold any of the cards, let alone all of them. And you really are left with the sense of Reed is unstoppable. It's interesting. There's like this vestige of who he used to be and who we knew him as in his promise to Sam that like we'll be peaceful here, but like this is ours though.
Because they're literally, because the other thing that we didn't mention is the fact that he says that, but at the same time they're talking about throughout the 6 issues that this city in forest lands or the grasslands of Berlin is expanding and it's
Yeah.
absorbing
Yes.
things and bringing it into the city. And yes, something, you jumped the gun just a teensy bit, but yes, I think this is the very first time that we are actually reading the ultimate version of Falcon, Sam Wilson. I
That's
like the fact
true.
that he's finally here.
Yes, that is true. So we can talk about that a little bit more. But I just use it as it's a good moment of we're kind of reminded that it's Reed in a really twisted way. It doesn't feel like they borrowed a name of someone we know to make some villain that we have no connection to. It's one of those little things that kind of makes you feel like, oh wow, that really is Reed Richards. He's just he's just not the Reed Richards that we remember exactly, but it's him.
What I really appreciate about, because again, like this is the first time that we see him as the maker. And we also have to remember that it wasn't Jonathan Hickman that gave us this evil or this villainous version of Reed. That was Brian
Mhm.
Michael Bendis in Ultimate Doomsday. And he
Yes.
did, and I just have to give Jonathan Hickman so much credit for the fact that he's like, okay, this is where we left Reed Richards. Now, where do I go from here?
Yeah.
And what Jonathan Hickman created from what Brian Michael Bendis built is one of the craziest ideas. I mean, I know that I'm sort of sounding like a broken record here, but I just have to, even though I will always say right now that he is sort of like one of those creators that has fallen from grace these days, but I just cannot get over his brilliance of how he writes these characters. And I just cannot get over how he turned Reed Richards into this creature. It is one of the scariest villains in the Marvel lore. I have to say that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's his presence is a big part of what makes this such an unsettling read as opposed to merely a bleak read. It's a lot.
Do you feel like he's sort of their version of Doctor Doom? Because what's very interesting, I want to make
Yeah.
this point, because I don't know if you're reading the current Ultimate Universe that is about to come to an end, but the reason why I want to say that is because in that version of the Ultimates, Reed Richards is actually Doctor Doom.
Mm. Yeah, I'm not, but I'm vaguely aware of that. But I I can see it, and even if that's not really the intent, I can see that read on it because I mean there's so much there I mean there's a lot of parallel. And we even saw that when we were reading the original Fantastic well, not the original, but the Ultimate
The Ultimate
Fantastic
Fantastic Four.
Four first issues. There's a lot of parallel there in what Victor brings to the table in comparison to Reed. And I think letting him letting him off the letting him off the chain and behaving as a villain in this way kind of reveals that that foil really is something that's actually there under the hood. So that's one of those ones where I would say, am I certain that in doing this writing, there was the plan for Secret Wars at this point already? Yes. Am I certain that it was an intentional, this is the version of Doctor Doom? No. But do I think that when you use Reed Richards as a villain, you inherently have some qualities like that because they are foils to each other in more ways than one? Yeah. So I think that's a very valid way to look at it and to think
Yeah.
about it then.
Yeah, and I also wanted to harp on something that you said earlier because you're absolutely right. It's like nothing really does get resolved at the end of this
Right.
story. I mean,
Right.
but we still do get a nice ending to a certain degree on this arc. Basically, like you said, Sam goes in on Nick Fury and Hawkeye's orders as a spy, and he is actually found. As a matter of fact, the funniest thing is like Reed basically says, "Yeah, I kind of knew he was here the minute he stepped foot inside." But he has no intention. You see, that's where we do still see the humanity in Reed. He's like, you're not a threat to me, so I'm not gonna hurt you. And he will, and you can even see that he does have somewhat of a heart when he actually is willing to let Captain Britain and Thor leave and get out of
Yeah.
there. But he specifically does ask Sam, I'll let you go if you do me one thing. He goes, I need to speak with Tony. He
Yeah.
apparently wants to speak with Tony. And that's pretty much where we leave it. So I would definitely say if you want to see how that part concludes, you can definitely read the second story arc. That's basically how far I went. And ironically, that's actually also when you get to issue number 12, that's actually where Hickman leaves the book. The writer who takes over is Sam Humphries. And the reason why I laughed about that is because the exact same thing happened in Gatchaman. Gulliver
Oh, did
read
it?
the first
Yeah.
12 issues, and then Sam Humphries started writing the rest. He's doing a good job, by the way.
Right
But
there in his
I have
rear view window.
no discredit to Sam Humphries. I just found it really funny how 2 books at issue number 12 he becomes the main writer. So yeah, I would definitely say if you want to just see what happens between the Maker and Tony Stark, feel free.
Yeah, keep
But
reading.
it was good to end on this note because of the fact that you still are left with some little bit of hope. But let me just say, people, we're in for a wild ride now that we are officially leaving the Ultimate Universe and we're going back to 616.
I'm pretty excited, I gotta say. But I
Yeah,
really enjoyed our jaunt into the Ultimate Universe because it had been some time since I'd read some of these stories, which for a good long while I was very familiar with. And, it comes back to me as I'm reading it. And I like it. And you can see why the Ultimate Universe is so beloved. And you can see why, even if this isn't your favorite story, hey, this is pretty cool. They did some good stuff over here. These are interesting stories being told with this version of the characters. So I'm glad for anyone who is along for the ride with us to get to experience it.
yeah, and I just have to give so much credit to the Ultimate Universe because the Ultimate Universe to me is really what launched me and got me to get a better feel for some of these writers, and particularly for me, the part that really did it for me was Mark Miller because
Yeah.
Mark Miller is now one of my favorite writers. I am so deep in the Miller World comics that he's creating, and he writes such fun stories. I love everything that I have read. There's not a single story that I have read of his that I found boring, except for one that recently came out. I mean, like, it was fun, but it definitely just didn't feel like a Mark Miller novel. It was called Vatican City. It was just 3 issues. But reading things from, Kick Ass to Nemesis to the Ambassadors to
Hmm.
Sharky the Bounty Hunter. There are just some crazy ideas that he has, and you can definitely see where he's pulled things from. But, this was the way that Mark Miller was able to get his feet wet and eventually be able to venture out on his own.
Hmm.
He not only at this time was he writing the Ultimates, but he had just written Superman Red Sun just a few years prior. But no, his work on the Ultimate Fantastic Four books and his work on the Ultimates, those were my personal favorites. But I'm not
Hmm.
going to lie by saying that The Death of Spider-Man is an amazing story too.
Hmm. Yeah.
Those are some of the things that I will definitely take away, and it was really great to revisit it all. It really
Oh yeah.
was.
Yeah, no, we got to read some really nice peaks of the Ultimate Universe, and there's more there. So
Yeah,
read more Ultimate Spider-Man. Hey
yeah,
everybody, go ahead and do it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the adventure is just beginning, everybody. We're going back into the 616, and we're going to be going into Arc 3. And one of the things that I am really excited about is because I believe Andy has not read some of these yet. We're going to be getting back into the world of X-Men, and we're going to be reading some incredible stories that do expand on where we last left them. Because let's all remember, we left the 616 universe pretty much around the time that we were reading Decimation. That's where we
Hmm.
left it. We're going to be reading the Messiah trilogy next. That's some good stuff.
Hmm.
But if you want to do some prior reading, then I would personally recommend a story called Endangered Species. It is actually a B story. Imagine that, in a couple of X titles. And it's basically a small story about Hank McCoy, Beast, trying to find a way to multiply the X gene to try and prevent the mutant from becoming extinct.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily required reading. It bridges the gap between Decimation and the Messiah trilogy perfectly, I think. But it's not necessarily something that you have to read, especially, I mean, the story that I personally do not even remember the story that's actually taking place in the X titles themselves. I've just bought those issues to read Endangered Species.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Mm-hmm.
action packed. I will definitely say I remember it all being action packed, but yeah, it was all about Endangered Species. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting back into the Messiah trilogy all over again. That's the Messiah Complex, the Messiah War, and Second Coming. It's going to be a really fun ride, and it's going to lead up to the next Jonathan Hickman stories, which I'm even more excited to tackle again.
Yeah, yeah, and you are correct. I have not read the Messiah trilogy before, so I am really looking forward to this step. This is gonna that's be a pretty big one for us.
Yeah, and there's some excellent writers on there. We've got writers like Peter David and Ed Brubaker. Like we got some good writers on these books.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we're in for a real treat here.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for watching. Please leave your comments in the box below. Let us know your thoughts about this specific story. I mean, what's your favorite Ultimate Universe title? And if you are, in fact, reading the current Ultimate Universe books, I mean, they're coming to an end very, very soon. What was your favorite title? I actually will say that even though it had some lulls in it, I really did enjoy Ultimate Spider-Man, all 24 issues. It was a really good read overall. Ironically, also a Jonathan Hickman book.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest videos, and we will see you in the next one.
All right.